Hello, everyone. Welcome to another forecast. I'm Claire Moon, and we're going to be talking about December 2025 in terms of the astrology, of course. So, if you are new here, welcome. There is a chat over to the right-hand side of your screen where you can communicate with the other astrology enjoyers if any others arrive, or you can ask me questions because I am not going to cover every day of the month. Sometimes I get close, but I don't think it's going to happen this time. So if I skip over something or a date in December that you wanted me to talk about, let me know in the comments. Let's see, or in the chat. If you listen to this later and you have any questions or concerns, you can hit that below in the comments. And of course, hit the like and subscribe buttons if you want to keep up with this, hit subscribe. And I also have a newsletter. So a couple little announcements. Of course, I still have my newsletter. It's a once a month thing. And actually, I just had this month's go out. So apologies if you didn't get in on that one. However, all of the things that I write in my newsletter are also on my website. So you can always just check that out at www.aligninglightastrology.com. And that's also where you can book. That's where you can read everything I've written, see any of my other services. I have service descriptions. So all of that is at my website. And what else? Discounts. That's usually why people sign up for the newsletter because that's the first place you're going to hear about discount codes. I think I'm gonna be doing them quarterly. For a while, I was like the queen of discount codes. What I've been more telling people is to just use my sliding scale if times are tough. Use my sliding scale. Most people qualify, at least the kind of people that are listening to me. And also, the discount code for this month, so for November, and there's still a good week left of the current code, which is Libra, 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 and that's for 25% off of all of my services, which is actually a steeper code than I usually give out. So I try not to create scarcity, but this is one moment where there is a little bit. There's only 1 week left of using that discount code. So check it out. Um, my voice is a little hoarse and rough. I have been sick-ish. I feel good, but I've still got some lingering like coughing. So if you see me doing that, like I might need to do that at some point today. Otherwise, I feel great, but I still have a little sultry Phoebe from Friends voice. That's definitely going on. Other than that, nothing new. Still just working on all the things I'm usually working on, which is seeing clients, doing my research, doing this, doing my monthly Q&A. I help Chris out with his reading group once a month. So I help with Melissa Marklin. If you're part of Chris Brennan's Hellenistic Astrology course, I help out with that. So that pretty much keeps me busy. And with that, I think that's my usual things. Let me see if there's anyone here. Otherwise, I might just go to my dates of interest. I'm going to do a little bit of reflection on last month, and then we will get into next month. As I record this, it is Monday, November 24th. So there's still a little bit left of November. There are people in the chat. Amazing. Hello. Yeah, November was interesting. I really had to be on my game in terms of like sticking with my routines, making sure I'm getting shit done. Because I ended up rearranging like my whole month schedule like twice. And it was definitely some Mercury retrograde shenanigans. However, this Mercury retrograde has been such a mixed bag for me. I do have a little bit of Mercury activation this year. Not a ton, but a little bit. And I did find out, I don't know if anyone has, I wish I should have brought it in, but there's like this classic crunchy granola hippie thing, like the incense box, the wooden box where you put your incense and burn them. And then you close the box and it's got pretty like carvings where the smoke from the incense comes out of there, one of those deals. So I've been using one of those things for 2.5 years. And just this Mercury retrograde, I found out that there's a little door at the bottom where there's a little storage area where you can store more incense sticks. blew my mind. There's always one thing like this where I figure out something, some type of technology. This is some type of technology, but it's wooden box technology. So anyway, Mercury retrogrades, not all bad. A few things happened. I got sick. I lost a stuffed animal. That's a whole thing. I found him. I tried to use horary. I failed because I'm not good at horary astrology. I'm like still learning. I'm a student of horary astrology. Good on natal, good on elections. All that's great. I still cannot find lost objects for the most part. I've gotten a couple lucky breaks where I found a lost thing using horary astrology, but no such luck this time. But anyway, it's been a mixed bag, but there's been some cool things. Has anyone been having any Mercury retrograde shenanigans in the chat? Oh, hi, Max. Nice to see you, Max. Yeah, you in a weird month. Yeah, it's been a weird month for me too. Definitely. Yeah, it's not been the easiest month. Um, but we persist nevertheless. Okay, I think that's great. So dates of interest for December, and then I'm going to actually do a little bit of reflection about November. So on December 4th, we have a Gemini full moon. On the 8th, Mars squares Saturn. On the 10th of December, Neptune is stationing direct, and Mercury will oppose Uranus. On the 11th, Mercury enters Sagittarius. On the 15th of December, Mars enters Capricorn. On the 16th, Mercury leaves post-retrograde shadow. On the 19th, there's a Sagittarius new moon. On the 21st, we have our solstice when the sun enters Capricorn and we get our most extreme light or extreme dark for the year. We have on the 24th, Venus entering Capricorn. On the 24th, Mercury starts roughly on the 24th. Mercury begins to set in the morning sky. So we're going to have Mercury somewhat visible for a little bit of this month, but not the whole month. Mercury or Venus and Mars are under the beams, but I'll get to some of those generalities in a minute. First, let's rewind. Let's go backwards. So the water trine. Let's talk about that really quick. Let me bring up my wheel here. So we've been having some water, just a little bit. And for me, I guess, and this is going to fall into different houses or different places in each of our birth charts. And so, whatever this transit is for people, it's going to show up in different areas of life. Uh, in general, though, for me, I've noticed that, especially with Mercury in Scorpio, my mind feels very sticky. Granted, I have water planets that are taking in some of this stuff, but all that Scorpio, all those Scorpio transits, it's making things feel a little sticky. Hard for me to let go. Things will come into the mind and want to stay. And I let it go and I let it go and I let it go again and it's still there. So very like mentally kind of ruminating. I was making up some funny kind of cheeky uh names for what this was. I should have put them in my notes. I didn't. I did use a rumination treadmill as one of them. Let me see if I can find my. Yeah, no, I can't find it. But definitely a perpetual melancholy machine. Uh, yeah, gravity well of despair. That one was my most dramatic and most emo. And for for context, I unfortunately, and I shouldn't joke. I actually did have some very difficult things happen in my personal life. There was a loss in my family, a distant relative, but I really felt for my closer relative who was losing someone very important in their life. And it was really sad. It was really sad and very surprising. And it's amazing how you can just be moving along with your day and all of a sudden you just slip into this hole of emotions or slip into this place of difficulty for an afternoon or for a day, or even longer. So I felt the water trine. I've been feeling the water trine. Also, creativity wise, I have been noticing in terms of dance, I got back into floor work. I took down my pole, which is funny. Mercury retrograde, but also the water trine for me. That's my pole. Usually it's in my living room and I'm dancing on it. But being I don't have it in there, I took it down for reasons. I had some in-laws coming in basically, and I didn't want the mother-in-law to see we hide these things from some people. Some people can't know. But anyway, it's still down. And so I've taken advantage of more of my open floor space, and I have gotten back to rolling around on the floor a lot. And that has felt very watery. I've just been like very movement that's flowy and connecty and fluid and threading and all kinds of fun stuff. So that's been cool. That's been fine. And another thing with the water train, last thing, I haven't noticed this. Well, now that people were talking about it, I kind of did. But I've been noticing it online, people talking about dreams and how dreaming has been really very vivid lately. More dreams, remembering more of dreams. I've been going from, I usually don't remember any of my dreams. I know I have them. I know sometimes they're stressful, but it's hard for me to retain dream retention. But I've been remembering some, like with this water train, the last month or so, last several weeks. I have been noticing my dream retention has increased. So for me, it's like kind of still nothing. It's still a nothing burger kind of, but it was remarkable. And for other people who actually are kind of good at dreaming or good at navigating their dreams, then I imagine that this water trine is going to continue to be a really fruitful, helpful thing in terms of dreaming and squeezing more juice out of the dream world. So in that, as we see planets leave Scorpio, we're still going to have our big boys here. We're still going to have Saturn and Jupiter holding down the water fort. However, as we get Mercury and Venus out of here and decreasing the amount of water, I also imagine our dream juice is also going to decrease. So, as I call out those ingresses later, just know that those are your cutoff dates for dream time. Let me just state them again. I will just state them again. Like the 11th of December. So the 11th of December, we lose Mercury from Scorpio. And on the 24th of December, we lose Venus. Yeah, no, earlier than that. So yeah, it's really the first week. Venus, when are you going? Yeah, we already lose Venus on the 30th. So we're only going to have Mercury in there until the 11th. And then, yeah, maybe our dreams won't be as vivid. We'll see. Okay, I think that's it for water trine. Uh, I did have like I tried doing a prediction, like a really specific one. I knew I shouldn't have done that. I was wrong. So I had wondered, and this is very specific to American politics, so I apologize for people who are not affected by our our shenanigans up here. But I wondered out loud, which is always my first mistake, if these oppositions with Uranus, I wondered if on the first week of November, if that would change anything in terms of the current trajectories politically that were going on in the United States. And so they froze food stamps. They made it so that people couldn't get the usual funding and help that they get to feed themselves, so they get food. And I was hoping that this would be some kind of this Mercury Mars opposition with Uranus would be some kind of change in that trajectory or some breakthrough of some kind, looking at that disruption in more of a positive way. And it was not the food stamp thing ending. It was not the government shutdown ending. I always wondered if the government was going to open back up, and it did not. What did happen in that week was a mayor, so you know, not the president, but pretty up there in terms of the amount of political power someone can have. The mayor of New York, that person got elected, and we got Mom Donnie elected, who is a very progressive, awesome candidate. So that was cool. I'll take it. Also on that day, it was around like that November 3rd, 4th or so. It was kind of a funny one. I was alerted by a friend that my ex was on Tinder. So I had the classic kind of Mercury's getting ready to go retrograde. They weren't retrograde yet. But yeah, something unexpected news. Mercury and Mars opposite Uranus. That fit. That was correct. And yeah, that was it for that. And then last kind of specific note, and this is actually from a couple months ago. And this also has to do with more of a vague prediction that I was trying to get at when I had been looking for September at Venus's relationship with Mars. And so you can go back and look at me talking about this Venus-Mars relationship. And I thought it was interesting because I started off the delineation or the interpretation how I usually do, thinking that, okay, we've got a sextile. Venus is in the overcoming position, so they're stronger in a lot of ways. Dignity-wise, Venus is also doing much better than Mars. Venus receives Mars. So in a lot of ways, this Mars kind of presence in Libra looked mitigated in a lot of ways. Jupiter overcoming, so mitigated in a lot of ways. And at the same time, I've noticed, and this is more of an observational thing that, and I've only been watching now for, this is 2016, 2017, so not a decade yet. But every time Venus is in this last 10 degrees, especially of Leo, they tend to put more fuel on the fire than they do act as like the usual calming, cooling, connecting Venus presence that usually I would say would make Mars more mild, calm down the situation. And that's not really what I see when Venus is in the last part of Leo. And if we look at the subdivisions of the zodiac, we can see that we got the Mars decan and then we also have the Mars bound, especially in these last like 5 or 6 degrees, whatever that is. I think it's 5 degrees. And so I do notice like Venus seems to pick up a sword and shield and be pretty spicy and like full lioness roar mode, like during this part of Leo. So you'll also see in my interpretation from September, I do bring that up, that sometimes Venus is actually more spicy than we think they're going to be. And even though this is a sextile, that didn't really seem to do much. And so the thing that ended up happening around this time, and actually I should have mentioned this before, content warning. So I'm going to take a sip of my coffee, content warning, particularly around violence and yeah, content warning if you don't feel like hearing about violence. Um, there was violence on September 10th, 11th with that star-spangled ding dong, Marley Merck. So he died, and that was a very spicy day. That's an understatement. So what I had called or projected to be a spicy day, it unfortunately was, and it created a lot of discord that had ripple effects of harm that went outward and outward and outward. So that was a really unfortunate couple days. The moon, as we got into September 10th, the moon was at the end of Aries. It was connecting with Chiron, opposing Mars, and then moving into a square with Pluto. So that is why I had said that, okay, this is a day to watch out for on the September 9th, 10th, 11th. I thought, oh, well, maybe Venus and Jupiter can hold things together. But really, it was just Jupiter holding things together. I think Venus was pouring fuel on the fire from their lioness position, for better or for worse. And so I think this was a good example to bring up, even though it's a difficult example. When I am giving some kind of interpretation of days ahead, and I see something that I am going to probably call spicy, or if it's like a Mars or Pluto thing, I will straight up call it violence because Pluto, Mars, things do that, and or danger, literal danger. So I call those things out when I see them. But in terms of like the great like breadth and variety of possible manifestations of some of these things, then another shorthand that I use when I see a difficult day in the sky like this, where it could be for some people, it's not going to be anything. It's going to be nothing. But then for the people who, maybe that sky is going to be a crunchy or difficult or spicy day for them, then some of the phrasing I like to use is to take care of yourself extra on that day. Take care of yourself, take care of other people, because that's good advice all the time. And it's especially good advice when the astrology weather might be challenging. So that's it's a little bit of reflection slash why I use some of the language that I do in this setting and what that can actually look like, which, because I do re-listen back to what I say. And sometimes, a month or two later, and with the news. And it's like, okay, yeah, I should probably speak on that day that I called spicy, and it ended up being way more than that. So, okay. And it was also within that whole eclipse window too. September was all those the eclipses we had. So it was an interesting month, as they say. And final old business thing. So transitioning out of that. Thank you. Content warning time over. That was probably, I think, the only one for this time. Usually I don't have them, but I try to keep things chill. But yeah, I think that's the only content warning for today. Thanks for listening. Oh, we got a Cancer sun who is also feeling the water. Yes, I imagine you are. Yes, and I did have this on my list, but I actually had just been like, well, maybe I'll just skip that one because it's already heavy enough. However, user letters and numbers says that, also what happened over November. So if we want to go a little bit more proximal to now, the most interesting days of November were really that fourth, third, fourth, when we had the Mars Uranus opposition. And then the next most interesting days were around Mercury's station, around November 10th, 11th, 12th, and when Mercury was then moving into Mars. And what came out on this week, November 12th, I believe on Wednesday, was, I think, the day. The Epstein files, some of that stuff got released. Just kidding. I thought there was content warnings. Done. Just kidding. We're still in there. So yeah, that stuff came up. I mean, I guess just being on the internet these days, you cannot go online seemingly without it just like jumping out at you immediately. So yeah, sorry to add to that. But yeah, that also is definitely something. And we see with Mercury and Mars in general, discord, relational discord, where words or thoughts or ideas are happening. That's the most general. But I mean, to be frank, sexual misconduct, sexual indiscretion, another Mercury Mars thing. So it fit, unfortunately. And for November, I mean, it's the 24th. the most interesting things have happened, in my opinion, and the rest of the month wasn't nearly as interesting. I didn't have that many notes for the end of November. I think it's more just continuing to respond to what the first part of November was. So I hope everyone's feeling okay over there. I know it's been a tender time. I myself online, it's been kind of a struggle to be online, especially if you're someone who's like a survivor of things, victim survivor of things. Uh, it's been a tough month online for sure. So yeah, taking breaks, nothing wrong with taking breaks, even from astrology or all of this. Totally reasonable. When things are wild out there, sometimes it's just too much information all at once. So we've got last little tidbit here for old business, the Mercury cycle, the Mercury retrograde. They entered their pre-retrograde shadow on the 20th of October. They stationed on the 9th of November. They had their Cazimi on the 20th of November. They had their Phasis, or will have their Phasis around the 27th. They're gonna come out of the beams, I believe. Yes. And they're going to station on the 29th of November. And then by December 16th, they will have retraced all of their post-retrograde degrees and they will be out of their post-retrograde shadow. So we've got about 2 more weeks of Mercury to wrap up their stories from this retrograde. If you do have any Mercury retrograde stories going on, anything that you have clocked as a Mercury retrograde story, it should be wrapping up or coming to some kind of conclusion over the next 1 to 2 weeks. Yay. Okay. And then as well, there can be a wait for information. Sometimes when Mercury is under the beams, as it is at the end of November, and even like a little bit after they come out of the beams, so they're going to be rising in the morning sky. It's a little slow to the uptake, but the longer Mercury is visible, the more likely we are to get that information, to get that answer that we were waiting for. I'm currently waiting for Astro Gold to get back to me about what I think I found as an error. And I've been having a hard time with the customer service. So I have a feeling that that's one of my Mercury retrograde stories, and I'm going to find out, I bet, like more toward into December. I bet then I'll find out if I correctly found an error. So I'll get my answer when Mercury becomes visible, perhaps. I think that's pretty much it for old business then. Um, yeah, we've got, again, just a few reviewing notes about dates. We've got several ingresses. Mercury is going to be entering Sagittarius early in the month. And then we get Mars, Sun, and Venus all entering into Capricorn mid to late December. We'll talk about Neptune. So yeah, a lot of mutable energy this month coming up. We're starting off, as it stands now, we've got a pretty good mix of some fixed along with some mutable energy. Jupiter holding down the cardinal. But as we get more and more into December, we're going to lose that fixed energy and we're going to get so many planets into mutable signs and more into cardinal toward the end of the month. So what that means is like if November, more of the ability to keep a pace, a holding pattern, sticking to some kind of routine or just much more consistent. With mutable energy, it's much more changeable, adaptable, flexible. So any of these Sagittarius, Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, anytime we have a lot of planets in these mutable signs, that might speak to a lot more change or having to be adaptable or flexible during that time. And so as December progresses, maybe needing to be more and more and more flexible as things change. So even though we're done with the Uranus oppositions, even though we are done with the Mercury retrograde, we are then coming into a different version of something that is changeable, less stable, and that's just this mutable energy. which can be fun. That it can just mean that there's several different things going on and getting to be open and having fun being with those things. Other overall thought for December, everything has to square Saturn and Neptune. So that's the big hiccup for December, in my opinion, is at the end of Sagittarius, all of these planets have to square Saturn and then square Neptune. Both of those are difficult in their own ways, which I will get into. But yeah, the one thing to note, however, is that Sun, Venus, Mars, Mercury, all of them will be in the overcoming position. So, being these planets are earlier in zodiacal order, it's like if two people are fighting and one is on top of a hill and the other is on the bottom, the one on top has the better position in battle. This is the same thing here where, whatever Saturn and Neptune are doing, all these planets at the end of Sag are going to have a better position to deal with it. They're going to have more power or agency to deal with Saturn and Neptune and navigate what they're throwing at us. So all to say, it's not the worst case. It could be worse. If all of this was happening at the end of Gemini, that would be the worst version, where then Saturn and Neptune would have the bigger voice in the conversation. But that's not the case here. All these other planets, they have the bigger voice. So, whatever we're navigating, in general, a good piece of advice is to slow down. I probably said that last month because we're dealing with Sagittarius. The beautiful, great thing about Sagittarius is how fast they are, but that's part of the problem sometimes is just going too fast. Also, asking questions, kind of being more Virgo-y. If we have Neptune, then we want to ask more questions, be curious, read the fine print, you know, watch out for confusion, uncertainty, things of that nature. And we can always just wait. If there's confusion, uncertainty in December, even just waiting a little bit till these planets get into Capricorn, then they're going to get past that uncertainty and past that lack of clarity. So it won't always be like that, but there is a bit of a hiccup here at the middle end of December. Um, the first half of December, mutable signs are pretty rough for the moon. So some kind of mind your own business days, if you will, might be December 3rd, 4th, 5th, and the 10th, 11th, 12th. So if we see where the moon is on the 4th, 5th, we've got the moon in hard aspect with both malefics. And then on the 10th, 11th, we have the moon in hard aspect with malefics again. And so those might be days where you're just doing something that's less comfortable, more difficult. Maybe that's the day, those are the days I'll be going to the gym, that week, or cleaning out my drain that I know in the kitchen. I know I need to undo the U pipe and it's going to be gross, but I know I have to do it. It might be one of these days. So it's not that something bad is going to happen necessarily. It's just not the most comfortable of days. So it's not when I would schedule the meeting unless it's going to be a difficult meeting regardless. Maybe it could just be descriptive of that. But all to say, not the easiest days of the month, not the most comfortable days of the month. And that is going to be, and so I'm kind of considering all of the time zones of the entire planet, December 9th, 10th, 11th, and maybe even into the 12th if you're more in the global Eastern time zones. And then as well, the 4th, 5th, 6th of December. And then by the time we get to the moon in our next mutable sign, by then Mars has moved out of that that square position with Saturn, and so stuff chills out. The tension in the sky breaks a bit. And so then mutable signs stop being as difficult because they're not dealing with two malefics in there in that modality. So that was a general point. And then Mercury's going to do their final of three oppositions with Uranus, final of three trines with Neptune. Um, it's kind of, again, like I know Mercury retrograde is over. However, uh, still pretend like it's Mercury retrograde and you leave early for things, be more flexible in the face of disruption or interruption. We might have to be a little extra flexible around December 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th. Yeah. Yep. And then that'll be done. Unexpected news also 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th of December, Mercury opposite Uranus. That can be breakthroughs, insights, understanding around your plans, ideas, but it could also be disruption or interruption with plans or ideas. Disruption with logistics or communications. So around that time period of December, around between the 8th and the 11th, over communicate with people about plans, where, when to meet, just making sure that everyone is on the same page. Might be little interruptions here or there. Give yourself extra time to do things. And now I'm going to talk a little bit for a second about planets being out of bounds, which is something that I don't talk about often, but I've been trying to keep an eye on it, and there is actually some things to report here. Uh, Mars, and what that means. So when the planet is out of bounds, that means that, okay, if we've got the path of the sun across the sky, and the sun is moving in that path, other planets can be slightly below the sun or above the sun in latitude and declination. And so symbolically, like, and we see it, I think, most obviously with the moon. You'll see the moon be really high in the sky sometimes, or like really low in the sky. And that's that moon being above or below that path of the sun, that path goes every day. So there's on either side, I forget the exact number of degrees now. I think it's like 13 or so degrees on either side of this imaginary line. And when the planet gets out of that, they're said to be out of bounds. And symbolically, that represents whatever that planet speaks to, their archetypes, really doing it with like max themness, like they're just doing it to the max potential that they can do that thing. So let's say we're talking about Venus, and Venus is doing art. Venus out of bounds is going to do art any way they want to. Nothing is holding them back. Not, plan and not like plans, barriers to plans. They're creating and making art just very avant-garde, whatever comes into their head. No one's going to tell them anything. So they don't really stick to societal standards. It can be a bit more of that subculture or counterculture type of presentation. Or that planet is, again, just maxing out, just doing a lot of whatever they do. And they're not being drowned out by the beams of the sun or the path of the sun. They're just like very distinct, independent, able to do their own thing, and maybe very loudly. And so then know that for all of December, Mars is out of bounds. So when it comes to action, doing, take it easy sometimes. Remember to rest. I know it can be a busy month with the holidays, but yeah, just make sure you're not going to burn yourself out. Conflict. I know they're going to, thank God, be in Capricorn soon. That's going to help when Mars gets into Capricorn. That's going to keep them a little bit more wrangled. But especially like the first half of December, conflict, I think, could be very active out there. especially too if like you're out there protesting or something, or, putting yourself on the front lines of anything. Be extra careful, I would say, the first half of December with Mars being out of bounds. And then that'll shift in January, which we'll talk about. And then Venus is also going to be out of bounds. And that is going to be from December 20th to January 13th. So then, like, relationship, art, beauty, romance, fun, yum yums, very much the 20th to the 3rd. And also, like, very doing it in your own way, not letting other people tell you how to enjoy those things or have your pleasures or have your relationships. It's like doing your relationships the way that you want to do them. That is very present more the end of December. So that was interesting. So then we're going to have an overlap where at the end of December, we're going to have two personal planets. I think Mercury actually gets in on the action too. From December 28th to January 15th, Mercury is out of bounds. So by the time we get to the end of December, we have three personal planets that are out of bounds, that are just busy, active, doing what they're doing without being held back. So have fun, don't overdo it. That's kind of, I guess, my main takeaway. Um, yeah, I got a bunch of other details here too, but I'm gonna leave them. Last detail though, a lot of these planets, I heard people on the internet talking about the bendings of the nodes, and it reminded me about the bendings of the nodes, which are square to the nodes. Now, I'm going to just refer people to Ancient Astrology, Volume 1 by Demetra George, page 355, 354 and 355. There's a really good visual that helps to imagine the moon's path through these nodes and then at the bendings when, like, because at the nodes, the sun and the moon overlap in latitude or declination. At the bendings, the sun and the moon are as far away as they're gonna, if they were both like there, they would be as far away from each other as possible in declination. And so there's some symbolism around that, saying that at the bendings, perhaps there's like this objective, separate nature of the body and mind, and that can give this really objective awareness to things. And that sounds like coming more from that astronomical Hellenistic lens in ancient astrology. They also bring up that the bendings and the lunar nodes have to do with the path of the moon. And it's the relationship between the moon and the sun. And other planets have their own nodes, their own relationship with the sun. And so this is again something from page 354, that there's this notion that maybe when other planets that aren't the moon are at the bendings, that it does not matter. So I am ignoring it. Long story short, I'm ignoring that things are at the bendings unless it's the moon. Final answer. I think that is all of my general stuff. So we can get into the details finally at 3:45. Thanks for hanging in there, everyone. Let's see if there's any comments or questions. I still, I think I still like December better than November. I think I still like it better. Yeah, and Sam brings up a great point too, that a lot of times, like if I'm talking about a planet in transit or a configuration in transit of two or more planets, if you have that in your birth chart, usually you all are handling it much better. So, yeah. Like say if you have a Mercury retrograde in your chart, then Mercury retrogrades in the sky aren't going to bother you as much as other people. So all that stuff I was mentioning about Mercury retrograde before, with kind of this note of leave early for stuff, be careful with things. The Mercury retrograde people who have that in their birth chart, you don't have to take heed of those things. You don't have to worry as much. And in fact, it might be like a really great time for you. Mercury retrograde might be a great time for you 3 times a year. You're like, oh yeah, this feels good. Um, so it really, everything depends on your birth chart. And so maybe this is a good time before I get into the details to just mention one more thing about how best to use this information today, because I have already been talking about a number of planets and some of which might not be important for you this year. From your birthday to your next birthday, that's your year. And some years, planets in the birth chart are active and awake and doing things. And other years, those planets are asleep and they're not doing stuff. And this is a big doctrine that was part of quote unquote Western astrology for the whole time it's been in existence, but we forgot and we only found out in the 80s and 90s. So we've only known about this ability to identify which planets are awake and which aren't. We've only known about that for like 20 or 30 years at this point, 30 years. And uh, it's really helpful because it prioritizes things for us. So if you can do annual profections and find your time lord, I know that's a lot of advanced words, and if they don't make any sense, don't worry about it for now, but put it on your to-do list. It's a pretty simple technique, but annual profections helps us to identify our time lords, which are the top like 2 to 3 planets that are awake for you that year. So some years Mercury is not awake, and so Mercury retrogrades don't matter to everyone during every year of their life. And so when I'm up here talking about Mercury retrograde, you can just zone out. You can just think about something else because it's not relevant to you. And I am so relieved to have learned this technique because like 7 visible planets is a lot of information. That's so much to follow. And turns out not all of it matters. So at any given time. So, as I'm talking about different planets today, take things with a grain of salt because it may or may not be important for you based on your annual profections this year. Okay, great. I'm glad we talked about that. Um, let's see. Let's look at my notes and get my chart to the right day. So, actually, the first few days of the month, um, not much to say about them, except we are starting to get into a bit of an engagement of Mars square Saturn. And this is an aspect that can feel frustrating, or it can signify doing a lot of hard work. It can be trying to finish a project, trying to make the final changes or adjustments so that you can finish out a thing. But it is the actions of Mars that are running into some kind of delays, hard work, challenge, potentially slowdown or rejection. So this configuration does make the first week of December a little bit more tense. Uh, so if you find yourself feeling tension, take a break, do what you need to do to take care of yourself, and know that the second week of December won't have this more tense aspect. Um, But yeah, that's going to start. And then what we do get on the 4th is a Gemini full moon in the second decan of Gemini and the second decan of Sagittarius. It's at exactly 5:14 p.m. Central Time. And this could just be, especially if you've been working on something over the last couple weeks or the last 6 months, this could be the coming to completion, figuring out the thing, having a realization, coming to the most active, busy part of a story, having anything illuminated or highlighted, and especially around the Gemini house topics in your chart. So, based on your rising sign, see where that moon is landing, and that's probably what that full moon is going to be about for you. So, for a Gemini rising, it's going to be about them. It's going to be about their mind, body, spirit, their identities, their appearance. Maybe they'll get bangs, maybe they'll get a tattoo. Who knows? Maybe they'll realize something about themselves or their identities. So that is interesting to me though because the second decan of Gemini, it's my favorite. It's very both and. Austin Coppock describes it as having juxtapositions. He says Prince had a planet around here. It's both and, not either or. Handling being juxtaposed or having things together that are diverging or irreconcilable, not simplifying the self into one thing or the other, embracing being both and, knowing that one thing can be true and another thing can be true, and that's okay. Potentially struggling with the great range of what it means to be a human or to not be a hypocrite. It's very difficult. Uh, Nine of Swords. If anyone is familiar with the Nine of Swords in tarot, that is also in this middle part of Gemini. So this is a place of a lot of thinking and thoughts and trying to come to some kind of conclusions, but in Gemini, it's hard to do that. Sagittarius is the place where we come to conclusions, where we make it all make sense, where we come to kind of ideas converge or information converging into an idea. So that's what's going on over in Sag. So it could be a lot of thinking with this full moon. So don't think yourself into too much suffering. But otherwise, that's going on in the fourth. Mars and Saturn, they can both see this. And we do have one benefic Venus helping out, stabilizing some things, but this doesn't look like the most comfortable full moon. Mercury can't see. Mercury's in charge of it, and they can't see to help out. So yeah, take care of yourself around the fourth. If things feel busy and if you can wait to do it another day, that's fine. This is not the day, like the fourth, fifth, as the moon is applying to Saturn and Mars. This is not the day where I would be handing in applications. I would not be submitting anything that needs to get approved, job applications, immigration applications. The fourth and fifth are not good days for that. Um, I have been I feel bad. I shouldn't joke about moon water. I know some people do it seriously, and it's fine. It's like astrological magic, and I do a lot of astrological magic, but this is not one where I would do a lot of astrological magic. It just looks unstable. Final answer. Uh, but yeah, I guess one, it's not really advice, but just something that we might need to do on the 4th or 5th of December is hold space for that both and. If there's anything that is vexing us in our mind, we may have to just set it on a shelf or just set it down for a minute and just let it be unreconciled. Let it be unsolved for a minute and come back around to it later. Sometimes that can be the best thing to do, especially if we're thinking really hard about something. Uh, and then I saw I'm pretty sure there were no lunar benefic enclosures this month. The Venus and Jupiter are not in the configuration to be able to have the moon get snuggled in between their rays. But unfortunately, we do have some lunar malefic enclosures, and there is one here that is on the 5th. So, a lunar malefic enclosure, this is a time when the moon is sandwiched between the beams of leaving one malefic and moving right into the next one. And the word malefic means, in some ways, extreme in the way that Saturn is extremely dry or extremely cold, and where Mars is extremely hot. And so, a lot of times with a lunar malefic enclosure, it can be an uncomfortable experience, but it can sometimes be one that we choose, like going to the gym or having a difficult conversation that we don't want to have, or doing our taxes, something that is not fun. It can also be other things happening that are not fun that we don't choose. So, this is not easeful weather. This is not when I would elect to do most things. But sometimes the weather does just fit for doing difficult things. It would depend, what I would say about, what would be safe to do around this day. It would depend on your birth chart entirely. But yeah, on the 4th, I would say just take it easy. Could be a difficult day. And specifically, universal time from December 5th, 2:22 p.m. to 6:18 p.m. Universal time. This is a 4-hour period. Central time, December 5th, from 8:22 a.m. to 12:18 p.m. So be careful on the way to work. Be careful as you get your day started. Give yourself extra time and yeah, set yourself up for success the day before. And on the 6th, on the 7th, we get Mercury Uranus engagement. So Mercury is going to get within 3 degrees of that last of three. So we've had 3 of these Mercury-Uranus oppositions. They can be disruptions or interruptions, but also breakthroughs, insights. Sometimes solutions are disruptive, and that's going to be going on more the 8th, 9th into the 10th. So it might have to be flexible, adaptable around 8th, 9th, 10th. I think I already mentioned that. We get Mars squaring Saturn on the 8th, exactly. So, yeah, it might have to be extra flexible, adaptable around that first, second week of December. Be extra kind to yourself and others. And P.S. I put those notes in my own calendar. I put notes in my calendar that say, be nice, in a good way, not in the non-confrontational way. But essentially, I tell myself to behave myself. If I see weather that's funky, there's certain days where you don't get into that discussion online. Just leave it alone, you know? This would be one of those days, like the 8th, 7th, 8th. I'm not going to be keyboard warring. You will not see it. I will be not on social media probably to save my sanity. Someone's asking if the moon is a time lord, would moon cycles be more impactful? Yeah, you get permission to be just a total basic moon girly for the whole year. You get to watch the moon cycles, see what's going on with the moon, align yourself with the light of the moon. There's more activity when it's got more light. There's less activity when it's less light. And eclipses. You're going to want to watch eclipses. That's what's going to be important to you. So, yeah, lunar returns, if you're into that. Sometimes I get into phases where I'll look at my lunar returns and then I'll forget about it for a year. But yeah, moon stuff. That's what you get to look at for the year. Definitely. Thank you for the question. Um, and then also, one other thing to note. So, moon in your birth chart, you're going to want to note any transits to your natal moon. So wherever your natal moon is, you're going to want to watch that sign as well, and any planets transiting in there or sending a ray into that place. Um, you might be noticing that more. All right. Neptune stationing. They station at 29 Pisces, 22 minutes and 22 seconds, which I put on there for the angel number fans. As an olive branch, I usually don't do numbers, but thought that was funny. Let me show you. Here we go. Yeah, Neptune stations direct at 29 degrees Pisces, 22 minutes, 22 seconds. 22, 22, super cute. Now it's gonna go, if you have any planets in late mutable signs, any planets in late Sag, Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, now Neptune is gonna start to move away from those planets and placements. And let's see. They move out of the mutable signs on January 26th of 2026. So that's when we get Neptune out of Pisces for good. If you've got any planets in that last degree of Pisces, hold on to your butts, I guess, for another month or two. Even if we can get Neptune like 1 degree away from a natal placement, that 1 degree can really help. So hang in there. I have my moon at the end of Pisces. I'm really looking forward to this. It's been fun with all the synchronicities and the omens and the spirituality and the creativity. Very cool. But when it comes to like existing in a material place where I have to do forms and be smart and have facts and information, Neptune's been tough. So all to say, they're stationing, and that's going to also make them loud. So then around December 10th, we might be noticing a little extra Neptune afoot. This is just another, let's just add it to there's a list of stacking testimony saying that around the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, like, be careful about logistical things, over communicate, pretend like we're in retrograde territory, essentially. If you feel inspired to do something really like selfless or service oriented, again, just make sure you've got your facts straight on even those really nice things that we might want to do to help out, but just make sure you got all the facts straight on it so the funds are getting to the right place and the right people. Let's see. Or like the words, any plans that you've got going on in December. I mean, this is great for art, spirituality. It's great for that. It's great for maybe even, do I dare say, having healing conversations. This could be good for having some kind of understanding, coming to some understanding, having some kind of conversation, and Neptune imparts a softness of kind of very forgiving tone to things. So as much as I am material world, not great, for a lot of more internal or subtle purposes, I could see the utility. I'd been talking to someone recently about the conversation was having me think about timing transits for doing internal work and what that looks like in the sky, when certain configurations are going to help us to do that internal work and kind of have the wind at our back, or spiritually help us and have the kind of spiritual wind at our back, versus a sky that looks more difficult. And this sky actually looks helpful, I think, in terms of making some kind of spiritual insight, figuring out things internally, doing internal work. This could be kind of a wind at your back, or maybe easier to make progress, even though, again, like, not great in some ways, this guy, but for some other purposes, it might be actually pretty fine. Let's see. And Mercury enters Sagittarius on the 11th. And this is part of why I'm thinking too, like mid-December might be decent for doing inner work. Because anytime we get Mercury or any planet in like a soft aspect with Pluto, that can be helpful for those matters of untangling certain heartstrings or untangling certain things in the mind. There could be some help there. Yeah. And then they're gonna be back. They were there. Mercury was in Sagittarius. Now they're returning yet again. And this is where they go from more deep feeling, subtle, not always verbal territory of Scorpio to much more expressive, outward, fast, fun Sagittarius. So now the speed really starts going. Mercury is obviously direct at this point, and they've had enough time to pick up speed. So, yeah, I think the pace will pick up. about the 12th of December and onward. We're gonna get just all mutable energy. Oops, all mutable. There's no fixed. There's like, and the one planet in fixed sign, the planets in fixed signs are the changey guys. So like, okay. Um, but yeah, the pace definitely picks up. Things get a little bit more interesting and we will need to be more flexible. Yeah, pretty much for the rest of the month. And they're now dealing with both malefics. So, I don't know. At this point, just the fact that we've got Mars and Saturn, they're coming out of that square. I know that there's a lot of planets that are they're kind of dealing in the background with some of this more extreme or intense energy of these malefics, but I don't know. I don't think it's gonna like ruin the party. I don't think people are gonna be getting themselves into as much trouble as maybe I've seen with words as I've seen in like September, October, November. Uh, yeah, it's just like the pace picks up, but like the feelings of tension and frustration are lowering, waning, getting better. So that's fine. Seems like the holidays to me. Uh, Another lunar malefic enclosure. This is gonna be another short one, but universal time on December 12th from 7 a.m. to about noon. So doing difficult things, hard work, maybe having difficult conversations, something uncomfortable. Not the best, most easeful time to do a thing on the 12th between 7 a.m. and noon, Universal Time. Central Time, that is like in the middle of the night. So this is more for third shift people. This is 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. So take extra care of yourself that period of time. Then we're going to have on the 14th, got a pretty waning moon by now. And Mars is going to square Neptune. So now this is our first of all of these planets marching through this square. They're all going to do it. And so maybe I'll just cover all of it at once. So it's these planets, they're trying to do their job. Mars is trying to be effective and make decisions and motivate. The sun is being the sun, exuding an identity, uh, being a firm sense of self. Cool. Venus, trying to do relationships. She does other stuff, but let's just stick with relationships for now. All of these planets are going to have to deal with Neptune, who is going to make things more spiritual. So now motivations might become more spiritual. Our sense of self or identity, we might be exploring in a more spiritual way. Our relationships or relating might have more of a spiritual influence as they move into Neptune. And Neptune can be confusing. So all of that, confusing our efforts, confusing our motivations, confusing ourselves, confusing our relationships. So do your due diligence to explain, make sure everyone's on the same page for where we're gathering, when, and who's bringing the green bean casserole and who's bringing the cookies, you know? Uh, and it's great for spirituality, great for creativity. I know squares can sometimes be a little rough around the edges, but sometimes squares can also just be very potent or powerful. So then just very potent, whatever the ingredients are. So very potent Venus, Neptune, that is potent unconditional love, which is a nice pairing if Mars is going to be around, potentially doing a conflict or doing a confused conflict. Venus is here having unconditional patience. This is very potent artistic potential. So if you're an artist in December, yeah, take advantage. Also, a lack of vitality potentially. And this is more to do with like Mars and Sun. So Mars and Sun are both planets that have to do with our vitality and our sense of energy. And I mean the moon too, but Sun and Mars here are going to have a couple days, 2, 3 days, where they're moving through Neptune here and Neptune's square ray. And it might be kind of more tired days. So, especially here for Mars on the 14th of December, take it easy. If, like, say it snows and you're shoveling and you feel tired, take a break. Don't push around the 14th. Um, and then kind of the same thing when the sun squares Neptune, which is on the 20th. So take it easy physically on the 14th and the 20th, especially if you're feeling a little tired. It might be time to more focus on dreamy, spiritual, artistic stuff for the day, not shoveling snow. Uh, or doing a bunch of activities. Good afternoon, new moon inner healing. Hello. Good to see you. Neptune. They are Neptuning. Um, Before you do any big gestures, don't make people paranoid. Don't want to project my own kind of Saturnian Dowdy McDowdersonness on people. But anytime I see Mars and Neptune together in hard aspect like this, and Mars is overcoming, especially in very fiery, it's very strong, loud Mars at this point. Sometimes what they're really jazzed up about is they're very inspired to act in some way, like deeply inspired or moved to take action. So just make sure before you do an inspired action that you got your facts straight on stuff, that it's consensual, that it makes sense. Don't go too fast. You could go galloping off to be a hero and slip in a puddle, if that makes sense. Or just even kind of overdo it yourself. A lot of this, especially like the last part of Pisces, the last part of Sag, if we look at the subdivisions of the zodiac, this is very martial Saturnian territory. Austin Coppock talks about the end of Pisces being very devotional and the end of Sagittarius having this quality of just like meeting that finish line, hell or high water, to the point where it can become deleterious to the physical form, just overdoing it or being forced for some reason to have to just drive towards something. So this is kind of intense. It can be a little intense. So watch for the martyr stuff. Long story short, take care of yourself in like a kind of reciprocal, reasonable way with others. Like it's not a comfortable sky, but like there's also, interestingly, on the 14th, there's like this Jupiter, Moon, Chiron business going on. And this could be very healing. Something about this is, having some understanding or finding a tool that helps with healing or I don't know, anything. Maybe even just a really good conversation with someone that, again, it's a lot of discomfort going on in the sky, but potentially also some healing influences as well, or learning or growing types of influences. And then Mars is going to enter into Capricorn. So this is going to break a lot of tension in the sky, even though we've still got some planets that have to do this whole dance with the emo folks down in Pisces. Um, there's that dance going on, but I don't know. Now that this Mars Saturn thing is into a sextile, that just feels like much more stable sky in general. Got stuff no longer opposing Uranus, so that's done. So yeah, at this point, maybe dust settling on some things. Mars in Capricorn is fantastic for so many reasons. They are good at doing actions in a very thoughtful, deliberate way that has like a long-term plan in mind. They understand consequences of actions. Uh, they are good at building. They're good at world building. They're good at being motivated, putting in like effort consistently so you can put in that effort for a long time versus getting burnt out or doing too much too fast. So, love an exalted Mars. That's the fancy word for it. At this point, too, they'll be getting a bit of a reluctant kind of relationship with Jupiter. Jupiter is doing excellent, but and then Jupiter is able to sprinkle some of their miracle fairy dust here over to Mars, that's great. Mars is like, sure. But Jupiter sees Mars in a place that Jupiter does not like. So Jupiter's like, yeah, I mean, we can be in a relationship and maybe I'll help out, but it's not like the easiest amount of help for Mars to receive. But there's some there. Uh, yeah, and then we got a sextile now between the lords of motivation and structure, action and discipline. And being able to put those things together in a really constructive way with more ease, with less crunchiness, less elbow grease, less effort to get things done. So it looks like a pretty constructive time on the 15th and onward compared to before. So yeah, if you got things to get done last half of the month in some ways, looks better. On the 16th, the sun is going to square Saturn. So not only did Mars get this injection of seriousness, realism, and Capricorn, but at the same time, we've got Sun and pretty soon after that, Venus having a very realistic, down-to-earth, practical discussion with Saturn. And Saturn is going to be sharing limitations, delays, obstacles, but they could be overcomable. They could be surmountable. The sun is really enthusiastic, driven at the end of Sagittarius, and I don't think they're going to be fully taking no for the answer. They're going to be saying, how can we get around that? Or how can we work with this? Or, how do we, in an optimistic way, approach what is difficult? And there is that optimism kind of raining out or winning out here, raining down upon Saturn. So that's not the worst case, again, versus if these planets were at the end of Gemini or something. But yeah, if you're feeling a little down, a little doubtful around mid-December for some reason, or if you're just noticing limits or challenges or just being tired, uh, yeah, that's going on too. So it's interesting that we're having these forces of pessimism or challenge really kind of butting heads with optimism and solution-oriented approaches. The solutions and the optimism went out, but that's going on. Responsibilities might be weighing heavily as well. I know this is a hard time of year for a lot of people, especially if you have a family and you're trying to, God, I always think about like single parents around this time of year. It can be really hard for them. I've read their words and heard their, you know, anecdotes in session and holidays for, again, especially under-resourced folks can actually be a really difficult time. So this could just be feeling the weight of that responsibility of making magic for your children when you don't have a lot to make magic with. So hang in there. It looks somehow surmountable for some reason. I know Jupiter ruling over those Sagittarius planets kind of helps. They can't see. So the mitigation of this mutual exchange, or it's not a mutual exchange. It's just a ruling planet being in good condition. This ruling planet being in good condition, Jupiter, that helps, but minimally, in my opinion, because there's no aspect. The moon like has to run around and like help arbiter agreements and things. But yeah, it's not the worst sky. And by this point, the Mercury retrograde post shadow is done. Venus is going to have their serious conversation with Saturn. So we've got a lot of things figured out at this point. Mercury has done their whole journey. A lot of those Mercury retrograde stories will be done. Um, Saturn is having their serious conversation with the Sun, serious conversation with Venus. And so, yeah, just don't be too hard on yourself. Don't be too hard on others if you feel like it's leaning over into too critical territory. But again, I don't think it's going to be that. Saturn is inferior in this position. So the criticism is not going to be the highest it could be. And it does feel like trying to connect with loved ones, trying to have a good time, maybe despite, if there's a challenge going on somewhere else or in the background or the recent past or something, trying to connect and have fun regardless of that or in spite of that, which is necessary. And then finally, we have a Sagittarius new moon. This is also at the very end of this sign. So I am going to bring up the subdivisions of the zodiac. So we can see we're in Saturn's decan, Mars is bound. That's where the Sagittarius new moon is at 28 degrees. They are just in the past. I love to see separating from Saturn. So both the sun and the moon are separating from Saturn's square. And so that speaks to this new chapter opening up in the wake of some recent difficulty or some recent delay, but it's in the recent past. Whatever delay, challenge, rejection, obstacle happened, the new moon shows some new beginning after that. And then this last, I'm going to read a little bit what Austin Coppock says about it. So the third decan, ruled by Saturn, he talks about choosing the rider or the vehicle. Like if you're taking some vehicle to the limit and that vehicle is going to fall apart and you need to bail at some point. So do you choose, what are you choosing here? It can also be a very oppressive or harsh force. It can be that harshness or oppression coming from lots of different sources, who knows? Uh, Giving everything you've got, getting things done just on time. Let's see. He talks about the myth of the marathon and the Ten of Wands. So carrying a burden until the end of the Lord of the Rings. So it can be burdensome, can be a lot going on. So if there is anything in your life, especially in the house topics of Sagittarius for you, like say for this Leo rising, in the fifth house, maybe this is children, something about children. And maybe you are just carrying a very heavy load around caring for children. And this new moon could be some chapter, a new chapter opening up, something ending, a new beginning related to that kind of amount of responsibility or duty or burden around children. That would be one potential interpretation I can make out of many. But all to say, it can be an intense kind of area. It's not just all parties and fun and wine and Sagittarius. I know the centaurs are in charge of that, and a lot of Sagittarius is fun. But if I'm getting a little extra flavor on this particular new moon, yeah, it's in these a bit more of these, uh, I don't know, kind of more harsh areas of Sagittarius. Let's see. What were my other notes? Yeah, Venus is there to help. The Lord of things, as I was just mentioning, Jupiter is in good position but can't really see to help out that lunation or support that lunation. But Venus is there to help and support. Mercury is around. So there's like a planning, communicating faculty around this new moon. Separating from Saturn, running into Neptune though. So whatever is opening up mid-December, anything opening up around December 19th, 18th, 19th, 20th, read the fine print, ask questions, be really clear about expectations, responsibilities, whatever you have going on, just be very clear about what is expected so we can avoid any confusion or, yeah, lack of clarity. And then the next applying aspect after that, yeah, the moon goes through a little bit of a void and then it runs into an opposition with Jupiter. So after this new moon, the moon is going to meet Mars, of course. but I'm thinking more like when the moon gets out of its bond. So when the moon gets 15 degrees away. This is part of my research. I've been working on my research for like 3 years now. I started this project in 2023. No, it's year two or three, something like that. But it's about the moon under bond. And it's funny because I'm always doing my research about it, which I read for 50 people, tried to do this technique, figure out A, does it work? Is it working how it says it works? And it does. It's awesome. But it's funny because I always forget to talk about it in my forecast. But it's a good indicator to say what is like the aftertaste on a certain new or full moon. How is it going to feel kind of afterwards? And especially after the moon gets 15 degrees away from the sun, we want to see what planets they're going to be connecting with. And as soon as they get that far away, they start connecting with Jupiter. So that gives us more of a positive theme, too. We're having the moon moving away from Saturn in the bond dealing with Mars, but it's an exalted Mars, and then moving into Jupiter, which is an improvement. So as long as we're reading the fine print, not getting hung up on any of Neptune's shenanigans, as long as there's, no deceit. I mean, that's the tricky thing. It's like when Neptune is involved, all these squares as well. I guess everyone's on dating notice too. When are people on dating notice? Everyone's on dating notice. I'm looking out for deception. That's more December 22nd through December 25th. December 22nd through December 25th. Very magical. Perfect for art, romance. Wait for it, there are caveats. Beauty, yum yums, having a beautiful holiday time. It potent Venus, Neptune. Cool, great. Draw a picture, color in your coloring book. Um, in terms of dating people, right? Who deceive. That I don't love with Neptune. So dating notice for shenanigans between December 22nd and December 25th. But then Venus gets into Capricorn. They get on a very level-headed territory. And now the bullshit detector is on. But have an extra bullshit detector on your person um, between the 22nd and the 25th. Yep, I think that's all I have to say about the new moon. I got a little digression there, but that's what I have to say about the new moon. Yeah, it goes from difficult to less difficult. Looks like an improvement. Uh, yeah, not at all the worst new moon I've ever seen. Feels fine. Just make sure you're careful if anything new is coming up, that you know all the details. On the 20th, the moon is applying right after that. Like I mentioned, they're going to be Mars when they're still under bond. But yeah, like December 20th could be kind of a mind your own business day a little bit. Pretty much any time the moon is in hard aspect to Mars, I'm really keeping my communications, if I can remember to look. I keep it to my trusted people that I can trust with this type of weather. It's like you don't trust everyone to drive your car in the snow. And there's some people I do. And similarly, there are some people I am happy to talk to when the moon is square, opposed, or with Mars. And there's some people I know I should not be talking to them when the moon is with Mars. So this is one of those days on like 19th into the 20th. Uh, yeah, pick your battles. And yeah, I'm kind of almost weirdly happy in a way to see Saturn with Neptune because Venus is going to be dealing with a square from Neptune, which can be shenanigans and deceit. But Saturn can be realism and the bullshit detector that we were just talking about. So it's very interesting to have both of them here. Now, traditionally, Saturn is also deceit. So it could be like double deceit. But that's the tough thing is like there's nothing you can do to prepare for that besides just like ask good questions and be curious and wait and go slow. But yeah, I'd be remiss to not mention that that is part of what's going on in December. And part of this deception is going to be cute because it's just people hiding gifts from each other. Or it's like that classic, like putting it in like putting a gift in the waffle iron box so they think they're getting a waffle iron, but they're not. So like it can be harmless tricks, especially around gift giving, and that can be fun. But this is more why I'm like dating notice, mid-December. Have your bullshit detectors on. And then on the 20th, we also get that Sun square Neptune. So this was along with the 14th and the 20th, those days to not overdo it. If you're feeling your vitality is a little zapped, just take it easy and focus more on the spiritual, fun, artistic stuff about Neptune. Um, on the 21st, we have our solstice. So this will be our most darkness or most light that we're going to have for the year. So Sun is going to enter Capricorn. Happy Sagittarius season. We love you. Also, soon to be Hello Capricorn season. And so I forget how many hours of daylight I'll have here, but yeah, not very many. And then we're going to start to get more light increasingly, increasingly. And in the southern hemisphere, they're going to have the most light of their year. They're going to have their peak summer. And then after the 21st, they're going to start descending into more and more darkness. And symbolically, I mean, I just like to lean in. That's where a lot of the kind of Instagram witches and stuff are so helpful because they give us all of our fun rituals that we can do to really align with having a lot of light and like moving and shaking and doing stuff out in the world and making things happen versus if it's a time of the year when there's not as much light, we're going to be more in resting mode, planning, preparing, regrouping mode for the time when we have more sun. So there's definitely things to do for each phase. And we don't have any more squares with Saturn or Neptune for the sun. So they're done with that. They're with very motivated, very focused Mars. So pretty constructive energies here. And then on the 24th, Venus is going to join them. So this whole month, Venus and Mars being under the beams. So a lot of parts of our life ruled by Venus and Mars. So this theoretical Virgo rising, we're going to have for them, then the rulers of their second, eighth, ninth, third, all of these houses, those things might be quieter for a few months here. Or they might be because they're going to be going through some kind of rebirth as the sun moves through Mars, as Venus moves through the sun. We're going to get this kind of reset button on a lot of areas of life. And those areas of life might be happening more behind the scenes, a little bit more quietly. Again, pretty much into quarter 2 of 2026, at which point Venus and Mars are going to become visible. But that's another thing that's going on. And then once Venus gets into Capricorn, they're, I mean, in my mind, just even more affected by the beams. They are not given their little sun hat or sunbrella. Not yet. They're not in their bound yet. But yeah, it's a tough time for Venus too. There can just be like Venus being too close to the sun, Venus being a bit too warm, a bit too energized and activated. Being in Capricorn helps. That does dial down the kind of maybe too much activity for Venus here, but I do wonder if part of this isn't just a lot of socialization happening, or maybe there's a lot of parties or getting ready for parties. We're coming upon the new year. I know a lot of people celebrate the new year. So I wonder if Venus isn't just going to be kind of running around doing a lot of hard work and tasks to get ready to be beautiful, gift giving, socializing Venus. So that's a vibe. And we're going to have this benefic opposition, which is kind of interesting. We're going to have Venus on one end of the sky and Jupiter on the other. And so at any given point, one thing that this means is that we got at least one benefic visible, or at least Jupiter will be visible, one benefic, and the top half of the sky one benefic on the lower half of the sky at any given point. Uh, and it can be like bringing together a lot of good things all at the same time. But when it's in an opposition, it's almost hard to hold space for all of Jupiter's growth and opportunities, as well as all of maybe Venus's socializing and pleasures and yum yums and stuff like that. So there can be challenges even with moving towards something that's pleasurable or helpful, like having to do some hard work around those things. That's a sad Saturn. Having to do hard work around those things, having to it almost it almost becomes not as worth it. Like, oh, I have tried to put together like all of this whole, party, and maybe it turns out beautifully, but people don't realize like how much work you put into it. That feels like this. That feels like this a little bit. So there's a lot of good stuff around and a lot of stabilization when you have two planets that are in the same modality like this. But when they're in opposition, it can just be hard to hold space for all the cool things that are going on sometimes, which is a weird problem to have, but a good one. Yeah, they're struggling with a really ambitious recipe. That was the thing from my notes. So be kind to yourself. You do not have to be Martha Stewart. Okay, and then we get to the 25th. Mercury, around this time, Mercury starts setting in the evening sky. So at this point, even more like now, yeah, logistics, buying and selling, any last minute kind of things that you have to plan for the year. I would try not to make it last minute. Mercury's going to be struggling at the end of the year a little bit. They're going to be under the beams, not in a sign they like. They do improve a lot on the first. So as soon as Mercury gets into Capricorn, their condition improves a lot. But that's not till January 1st. So all to say, just continue to not move so fast, doing so many different things that you're starting to drop balls or miss things, over communicate, ask for help. Um, yeah, don't go too fast. Let me check in with the chat here and make sure I didn't miss anything anyone wanted to talk about as I come into the end of the month. I cannot believe it's December. I feel like I just got out of my quarter one document and now I'm almost done with my quarter four. It's nuts. It's so crazy. And I'm working on my 2026 content. So stay tuned. Definitely sign up for newsletter because the next newsletter is going to have all my 2026 content. I'm going to do kind of a by planet thing, and then I'm going to do it by month. And then if I'm super feeling good about it, I am planning on doing rising sign horoscopes. So we'll see. It's gonna be like 4 hours of stuff I need to make this month and then edit it. It went so fast. And thank you so much everyone for being here too this year. I've seen just consistently, like it's so beautiful to see the same people over and over again. It just makes me feel A, like I'm not scaring people away. And B, it's just nice to see familiar faces. It's so nice to cultivate relationships. So yeah, thanks for being here, everybody. Yeah, here's to more good than bad. Yeah, everyone needs a BS detector this month. Squares with Neptune. Squares with Neptune, man. Yeah, this I'm not like I think the threat level. I mean, I've been talking about a lot of potential little hiccups, but it feels like a lot of potential little hiccups. It doesn't feel like this the eclipses and stuff of September. It doesn't feel like the icky Mercury retrograde we've been having. This is November, wasn't it? November wasn't it? And I feel much better in so many ways about December than November. But I'm And I even tried to find good stuff. This has been kind of a bummer one too, actually, because like I always try to, see, I was trying to go through and find, when do I got like benefics trine? When do I have benefic sextile? And they're not. They're opposed right now. And the good news is that a lot of planets are getting help from the benefics all month. And the benefics are the opposite of that more extreme energy of Mars and Saturn. Venus and Jupiter are more temperate. They are stable conditions for growth, not too hot, not too cold, just right. So they help to stabilize things. So it's definitely mixed bag, which is fine. I'll take a mixed bag. All right. And then the 27th. That may also be a little bit of a take care of yourself extra day. Maybe especially like, yeah, earlier in the day, the more global east, or sorry, the more global west time zones you're in on Saturday, December 27th, versus like the further global east you get. This is going to be later in the day on Saturday, the 27th, but we got the moon applying in any event to Mars. So let me. Yeah, so this is like in the afternoon Central Time on the 27th. We got Mars getting this overcoming square, or Moon getting overcoming square for Mars. Um, Chiron's around. I don't love that. So that's the main reason why I'm just saying this day might be not my favorite. And then last thing, and then I'm going to talk about New Year's, and I also need to talk about void of course moons because we've got a big old Hellenistic grade one coming up in January, right? As the last day of December turns into January, we go into this weird Saturn void of course Saturn sandwich. It's a way to start the new year. This is the Gregorian calendar is a thing that people have to go by because of capitalism and stuff. But I don't love the Gregorian calendar. I would much rather just use astrology. Uh, but yeah, we'll get to that. Last thing here, Mercury square Saturn on the 30th. And this is another day where I'm not going to be handing in applications on this, the 29th, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Hell, let's just pause it till the 2nd of January. I don't like December 29th through January 2nd for handing in applications. I don't want Mercury to be applying to this square with Saturn and Neptune. So let's let Mercury get past that, and then you can hand in your applications, and hopefully they aren't due during that time. So. Yeah, okay, good. I'm glad we found that. Not when I would submit anything you want approved. Also with words, it's very like auditing, judgment energy, could be necessary audits, necessary judgments or criticisms, but say it kinder than you think you need to say it. All right. Last little bit, we got the New Year's Eve report. Where's the moon? It's a Wednesday. So like I don't know if people are going to be having like a party or a gathering on Wednesday, but that is a time when the moon is going to be applying to a square with Saturn. Yeah, there's other stuff in between them. No, there's no other stuff in between them. Yeah, it's not the most I don't know, high energy time. So on the 31st on Wednesday, if you are at a party, the moon is in Gemini, very chatty, very talking, definitely able to hold a conversation. People are chatting and talking. That part's online. That is online very much. And then we also have, you know, Venus and Jupiter being Martha Stewart with their hospitality and their structuring of things. And so some of this is fine, but long story short, there's just a little bit of a kind of a din, little bit of a heft or heaviness to the evening, something about it. And then, yeah, this is a void. It's the void moon. So this void moon starts at Universal Time, 6:57 a.m. on December 31st, and it goes to January 2nd at 7:09 a.m. Universal Time. So that's December 31st, the 1st, and the morning of the 2nd, Universal Time. Central Time. Shoot, I didn't write down the Central Time thing for myself. But I guess let me check. Did I put my Astro-seek thing down there? I want to teach you guys how to do this on your own. So I have the Lunar Enclosure calculator linked below from Astro-seek, but I'll have to add it later. Astroseek.com, Void of Course Moon Calculator. That's the other one I love. And you can choose the Hellenistic version, which is that the moon doesn't make any aspects within 30 degrees, regardless of sign boundary. So that's why I call it the big Hellenistic grade void of course moon, because it's not just a few hours at the end of a sign that where you don't want to send in something for like an hour. But this is like 3 days, 2.5 days. It's like a whole course of the moon going through a sign almost. So it's a longer period of time. Uh, so that's where I'm getting this information. But what a void of course moon is it's a time where the moon, like I said, is not making connections with any planets within a reasonable orb. So they're not being beheld by Jupiter nor any of the Capricorn planets. They are seen by Saturn. Mercury is changing signs, so they're going to be out of view pretty quickly here, too. So, all to say, the moon is only really in contact with Saturn. And then once they leave that aspect with Saturn, they don't have another aspect for another 30 degrees. And so, when the moon is not connected with other planets, it is thought that the things that we begin don't amount to anything. So if you wanted to make this beautiful cake or something, the cake is not going to look like the picture if you do it during a void of course moon. Or let's say you wanted to rent an apartment and you signed the lease during a void of course moon, something might get in the way where nothing will come of it. If you make a plan with someone, if you ask someone on a date, nothing will come of it. So anything that you want to go well, anything you want to begin that you want to turn out well, then the advice is do not begin, do not start. It's the initiation. Do not start it during a void of course moon. It's like planting seeds in dry, nutrientless soil where nothing can grow. Planting seeds in the sand. That's a good metaphor for it. So don't start anything important. And this is good to know because, like, the 1st of January is when everyone is doing their New Year's Eve resolutions or whatever, and they're getting back, everyone's getting back on their bullshit, you know? And so don't like do this recommitment to start this whole thing. Just wait till the 3rd of January. Wait till the moon gets into Cancer. And yeah, wait till the moon gets into Cancer. And then you can start all your new initiatives. And I'm just going to say exactly when that is. That's January 2nd at 7:09 a.m. Central Time. So let's see. Is there anything else I need to say about that void of course moon? Does anyone have any questions about it? All right. And then thinking in terms of context, um, you know what? I think I just gave out, oh, I think this is an error. I think I just gave out the times for the lunar malefic enclosure, not the void of course moon. Hold on a second, because they're like happening at the same time. I am gonna look up a thing. Hold, please. Let me share what I'm looking at here. So we got the void of course moon calendar. Let's look at December. And I want the Hellenistic one. Here we go. So this is universal time. Maybe I did say that right. I'm not sure, but 6:57 a.m. universal time. And then that goes until, yeah, 7:09 on the 2nd of January. Void of course moon ends. So yeah, that's the window of time you don't want to start things. And the interesting thing is like a lot of people are going to be starting parties. The party is going to start during that time. So does that mean then that the New Year's Eve parties are going to amount to nothing? Potentially. And maybe that's in a good way too. I mean, it could amount to nothing in terms of maybe you don't get the attendance that you were expecting. Maybe a bunch of people RSVP and some of those people don't show up. It could be that maybe a couple like things on the menu don't turn out exactly as you had hoped. You know, maybe the dip doesn't turn out how the dip was supposed to turn out. So there could be some little things like that. But it could also mean like, let's say you're worried about the party or you don't want anything bad to happen. Then also it's going to mean that nothing comes of it that way too. Because like sometimes I've heard this example from the astrology podcast. Oh, I wish I could remember the guest that he had on, but they talked about void of course moons, and the guest had mentioned sending in your tax returns during the void of course moon so that nothing comes of it, so that you don't get a bill back that you have to pay for your taxes. Or, you know, yeah, if I don't want something to come out of a conversation, then yeah, let's do it during a void of course moon. So, you know, it could just be a nothing burger for some folks, and don't take it personally. You didn't do anything wrong. Your dip is fine. Don't take it personally. This is not great party weather. This is not great party weather. And it's because the moon is like having a conversation with Saturn, which is duty, work, obligation, responsibility, depression, melancholy, uh, difficulties, delays, duty. I already said that. The moon is then getting no support, very unsupported moon, very difficult to make things happen. And then the moon's next aspect is Saturn again. And so it's like this Saturn void of course moon Saturn sandwich. And that's how the year starts off. So yeah, save your New Year's resolutions for like the third and beyond. Do not do them those first 2 days. It's not when you sign up for stuff. Final answer. Hello, Fallen. It's good to see you again. Think I think that's it. Mercury applies to all that square stuff. Yeah, so then last thing, and I had mentioned it with the new moon that we had at the end of Sagittarius. So similarly, at the end of December, the last few days of December into January 1st, be careful about agreements, contracts, negotiations, conversations that you have with people. be careful about words in terms of their veracity, their truthfulness, and yeah, and make sure that others around you are doing the same due diligence in trying to be accurate, fact-based, evidence-based, asking questions, reading fine print, very explicit about expectations. I feel like Neptune can be such an expectation machine. It's all the stories and it's all the what ifs, but all the what could be's, the couldieness, if you will. And Mercury, really good at making stories here. So don't get lost in any stories at the end of the month and over communicate in terms of making sure everyone's on the same page with stuff at the end of the month, especially if any new agreements are being made. I think that's it. I think I threat detected all the threats. Yeah, I did not. I've been pretty unbalanced this month and last month, so I apologize that it's been, you know, not super rosy stuff. But again, like compared to the last few months, like this one's overall fine. It's great. Like compared to November, I'll take December. And then note too, if if you're cardinal, if you have a lot of cardinal stuff, I think you're really going to enjoy December. Especially if you are someone who has a lot of mutable placements in Pisces, Sagittarius, Gemini, Virgo. If you're one of those folks, the first part of December is going to be a little more tense. The second half of December is going to be a little bit more chill. And yeah, pick your battles. Mars is out of bounds. Uh, so a marathon, not a sprint. Any final questions? Final dates you want me to look at that I did not? Any final hitting of the like or subscribe button? Using of my discount code, Libra, for 25% off. I think that's all my thingies. I'm not getting any last call requests. Let's see. So yeah, you can scroll below. I do have my newsletter sign up below. I've got a link to book appointments. I've got the lunar enclosure calculator. After this, I will add my void of course moon calculator. I have my astrology cheat sheet. And I have a fundraiser highlight down here. I always have it down here and then I always forget to say it explicitly. I'm usually giving to the bailproject.org. So check out the Bail Project. That's more of my domestic within the country sort of thing. And then the other one I have here highlighted is Doctors Without Borders. And that is more of my international prong because they help out a lot of different countries. So check out those two below. Those are great places if you want to add, instead of a present for your gift for the holidays, you could have someone give some money to a couple of those things. And I think that's all I have. So enjoy your holidays, everybody. Yeah, enjoy your any kind of time you have off of work that you get to spend with your families. And I hope it's, for the most part, joyous family celebrations, not ones you're trying to avoid, which also exist. And if that's the case, best of luck with that. If anyone has any questions or concerns, my email is aligninglight@gmail.com. And you can also, of course, put a comment below. Thank you again to everybody for your being here and your comments and participation. I appreciate it. And thank you for just being here all year. It's been, yeah, like KWOW said, it's so fast. I can't believe we're here. Stay tuned for my 2026 content. That should be coming out before my next forecast. So my next things, yeah, I've got a Q&A. The question and answer time is coming on the 11th of December at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And then I don't know when my next forecast is, sometime at the end of December. But before the end of December, I am going to be releasing info about 2026, including overview of what each planet is going to be up to, and visible planets, what they'll be up to, and kind of a month by month breakdown of the biggest things of the year. So I think that's it. I think that's it. Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much. And I'll see you around. Have a good month. Safe travels.